But these like bad boys, they seem to get a lot of the sort of sexual attention, right? And what is that about?
But that's like despite the fact that they're bad boys. I mean, so it depends on how we're defining bad boys. Okay,
Kind of arrogant, little bit.
Yeah. So a lot of those are cues related to testosterone, right? So having, being risk tolerant, so being willing to do things that are really risky, and being a little bit arrogant because you're always going to succeed. I mean, those are cues related to status and related to sometimes testosterone levels, right? And so we know that women like both of these things in their partners. And so because of that, those men will tend to do pretty well on the mating market. For men who don't have those qualities, so men who are not, risk seeking and are not arrogant, that's not necessarily going to not do them favors unless that also is, an indicator that they have other qualities that aren't working for them. You can have somebody who's very successful, right, and has high testosterone, who's not a jerk, right? And that guy will do pretty well.
Why would you tell your son to go to the gym?
I would tell my son to go to the gym because it's like one way that you can naturally increase your testosterone levels is by building muscle. And also another thing that does is that muscle mass is related to reductions in anxiety. And the reason for this is because if you're a big dude, it means that you're going to be able to protect yourself. And so your brain makes the adjustment and it makes you more confident and less anxious when you have some muscle mass. And so I would say go and do those things. And then also doing the things that you can to get access to resources and status, right? So study and work hard. Because ultimately, people who do that tend to do well, and people who do well financially and do well in terms of, ascending the status hierarchy, they tend to also do well in the mating market if they're men.
Have you got a daughter?
I sure do.
Your daughter comes home. Mum, I've tried my best. And no one's interested.
Right. Yeah. No. So for my daughter, then I would say, then you need to wait, right? You are probably in the wrong mating pool. Would be my advice to her.
Why?
My advice because a few things. So many of the things that women sort of possess that men desire in their choice of partners are things that women don't have that much control over, right? It's like a woman's like youth and reproductive value and these things related to fertility.
You wouldn't tell her to hit the gym?
I mean, I guess I might tell her to hit the gym and probably make her feel better. But I don't think that I would tell her like, you should probably go and get your hair done and, I'm trying to think. Oh, well, go off the birth control pill so that if she was on the birth control pill, but she is not. But I'm just thinking in an abstract way, like what I would tell her, like things that women can do to increase their attractiveness to men. I mean, it's like, okay, go be more beautiful. Like what are you going to say? And so, like I said, my real advice, if my daughter said this, I would say you like probably need a different pool of mates.
What if she was 35?
If she was 35, good question. So if she was 35, what would I recommend? Like, is this like what I would actually recommend to my daughter? Or are you trying to get at like, what should a woman do? Because I have two different answers, right? So if a woman is just like if you want me to write a pamphlet called 35-Year-Old Woman, here are the things you need to do to find a partner. I mean, it would have a whole list of unsavory like things that, it would be like, consider Botox. Men are attracted to women who have features related to youth and fertility. Consider having a Brazilian butt lift because men are also interested in this. Why don't you also consider, spending time on your hair and makeup? But I don't think I would write that book. That's not the advice that I would give.
Do men find confidence attractive in women? Because I was thinking about this as you were speaking, because I can think of many people that I know, many women and men, but many women that I know that are, maybe, approaching their 40s and they're beautiful, but they're single and they don't want to be single. And it's not necessarily a physical thing, it appears, but it seems to be more of like a self-esteem, confidence thing. And I can see how in men confidence matters. Like if they're stood up straight and they exert those those signals of dominance, or not dominance, but like a high status, that'd be attractive. Is it the same in women? Are men attracted to like confident women?
Yes and no. So women who are seen as more confident, like that is seen as more attractive, for example, like somebody who has some self-assurance of themselves instead of, sort of like kicking their toe in the ground. Generally, people find that attractive, both men and women. But the degree to which that is prioritized is hugely different between the sexes. And if you are a woman and you sort of go out and exude those cues related to like social dominance, for example, and social status, that's not going to necessarily get you a mate. And in some cases, it might actually detract from your attractiveness as a mate because people seem to view women who are in positions of power more negatively than how they perceive men. And women who are in positions of power, they're sort of there's definitely a double standard there. And this is something that has been fairly well studied, where they find that there's nobody more polarizing in the world than powerful women. So, for example, somebody like Kamala Harris, who is running for president, people seem to either really love her or really hate her. So there's this polarization that happens with powerful women. This happens for anybody who's run for any political office that is a female. You get these sorts of issues. And women who are confident and direct and assertive are seen as being cold and like we call girls bossy, right? When they have these kinds of qualities, whereas if it's a boy or men, it's like leadership potential. And so there is a double standard in how we tend to perceive this. And it's not, over the course of evolutionary history, women did well when they chose high status men, right? That would have given them preferential access to resources for themselves and their children. We don't get that same kind of a pattern for men choosing women, right? Men who chose women who were, high in status and, socially dominant. That doesn't necessarily translate into anything that's going to correspond to increased reproductive success.
A bit of a sort of correlated but uncorrelated point. People talk about daddy issues. Mm-hmm. And in your work, I've kind of seen hints of an explanation for daddy issues, i.e. if my father isn't around, that has a big impact on who I am. Mm-hmm. Is there any truth to this idea that people can have daddy issues?
Yeah, no, there absolutely is. And so and when I say this, daddy issues just simply referring to the fact that women whose fathers are not invested in them or are absent during childhood, that these women will tend to have more unrestricted or precocious sexual development and sexual behavior relative to what we see in women who grow up with investing dads. So just to give you an example of some research that's been done looking at this, research finds that women who grow up in a household without an investing dad, so dad is either gone or dad is there, but in name only, so he's not really investing in the family, those women go into puberty significantly earlier than do girls who grow up in two-parent homes with investing fathers. They also tend to have an earlier age at which they begin having sex relative to women who have two dads in the home. And they tend to have a greater number of sexual partners sort of over time relative to girls who grow up with two parents in the home.
Wouldn't they then also go into menopause earlier?
That's a really great question. And there is some evidence that suggests that there may be a decrease in ovarian reserve that might go on, but there hasn't been anything linking that to menopause just yet.
Which is the amount of eggs they have in their ovaries.
Yeah.
What role does the father play on our sexual preferences and decision making? So if my dad, am I taking, as a woman, do I take cues on what a good partner is from looking at my dad?
I have not seen any research that has looked at that. I've seen some research looking at whether women prefer partners who are kind of similar to their dads.
Do they?
And they do seem to, and which is interesting in its own right. But I do not know anything about men and their preferences and whether or not their sons then tend to emulate those preferences. That's an interesting question.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.